Okay. Good morning, everybody, or almost good morning. It's almost lunchtime. Thanks for having me here. I hope you had an equally good night as I did yesterday in Manchester. I would be grateful if you could ask me some questions just to keep me moving, um, uh, both due to the topic as well as last night's entertainment. So today we're going to talk a bit about regulation. We're going to talk more specifically on the GDPR, what that has to do or what that is going to change in our daily lives. And we are going to talk also about other regulations and looking at the problem or the opportunities we have with regulations and how we can actually implement them and keep our business running. Cognosec, I don't know, some people I think I saw yesterday already when I was talking about more doomsday facts than today. Cognosec is a security services provider. We provide services and products. We're an EMEA company. We have offices in London, Stockholm, Vienna, Dubai, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. So we cover the whole EMEA region. That's one of the reasons we have a lot of contact to different regulations, and some of our biggest assignments are supporting customers taking regulations and implementing them in a way that doesn't bring their business down completely or ties down their IT staff for several months. Regulations in general are necessary. That's something we have to live with. It's our own fault that more and more regulations are coming. It's based on the fact that every IT company that the sound is different here. Every IT company that processes data and has data, be it financial data, health data, or personal data, has a responsibility to protect that data because that is personal information from somebody else, and you have some kind of duty to protect it. Like in every other industry, all companies are driven by profit, and protecting data costs a lot of money. So until these things were regulated, a lot of it was not done or not done very well. Now we're facing the consequences. We've had similar issues. Initially, a lot of the Cognosec staff came from an online gambling company in Austria, and we were working with regulations on a daily basis. So in online gambling, I know there is a lot of companies in the UK. You're facing about 20 different European regulations that are very similar, but your audit effort and your audit report looks different, and it creates a lot of work for your staff. That's a very good thing about the GDPR, that the European community, and I'm going to do one of my Brexit jokes again, and not you guys anymore, but you're still going to deal with us, so you'll have to follow it anyway, came up with one data protection regulation that's valid for across Europe, which makes life a lot easier, and this is where we're going. If we look at data protection, we got several topics or keywords. We got data controllers, which are the companies that actually hold the data and manage the data. These are the people who actually receive the data from their customers. Personal data, that's going to be a big legal issue discussing what personal data is. Probably if we're a security company, we believe the legal companies are going to get even richer than us once GDPR is really being implemented. Because a lot is about terminology and not about technology. Data subjects, processing, data processors, consent cross-border processing. This is the kind of stuff we're going to talk about briefly. Cross-border is the most important one for the UK now, I believe, because it is the business you're going to be doing with us in Europe, and the fact that it's going to apply to you too. The GDPR is a regulation by which the European Parliament, European Council and European Commission intend to strengthen the unity for data protection. So once again, it's the most important part is it's a European regulation. It's not on a country by country regulation. What had happened before was that they came out with a directive. The directive was implemented differently in every single country, which actually then made it very easy for companies to dodge certain data protection requirements by just moving countries. Cognosec has worked in this field. We've worked on several data breaches, one in Ireland, one in the UK. So this is one of our strength areas. The GDPR is a regulation that increases the rights of data subjects. So until now, as soon as you put your data in and sign some kind of terms and conditions at the end of the page, the data processor was able to do everything with your data. Everybody signs all terms and conditions because it's 200 pages and nobody has the time to read them. Data controllers and processors are required to be explicitly clear on the information they hold and what they do with this at every stage of its life cycle. If we take the example, it was Target that used information it collected from their customers and then started doing data analysis on it, and at some point, I think it was Target or Walmart, at some point was able to tell their female customers that they are pregnant at a time where the customer didn't even know that yet, just based on their behavior and their buying behaviors. This will have to be made public. So in future, we're going to be inundated with information from companies who tell us what they're doing with our data. But we have the chance to actually say no to that too. Most important part is the deadline to comply with GDPR is May 2018. So if you haven't started yet, good luck, you're late. Because this is tight. We've seen it in our other line of business, which is PCI, where we help companies secure their credit card information, that their favorite, one of the favorite tricks was descoping and just making sure there's no credit card data in there, and securing only the credit card data containing part of your environment. But now that we're talking about customer data, there's barely anything going to be in any environment that does not contain private data in one way or the other. So suddenly you're facing the fact that you have to secure your whole company. The 6 principles that underpin the goal are integrity and confidentiality. Your customer wants you to have integrity while managing their data, and they want you to keep it confidential. They want a storage limitation, so it means they don't want you to store the next 20 years of your browsing behavior or your Netflix movies. They want a certain time period for it to be deleted afterwards. They want it to be accurate. They want the purpose to be limited. They want lawfulness, fairness, and transparency in the operations, and they want as little data as possible stored. And this is what the GDPR is going to enforce. Who does it apply to? Why am we talking here in the UK? It applies to the EU and all organizations which are trading with the EU. As this is going to continue, hopefully, it affects UK just as much as it affects Europe. Non-EU residents whose personal data and processing occur within the EU are equally affected. Any organization that collects or stores any data of European companies or European individuals is affected. And any entity that is in possession of information that could be used to identify customers. So it might not even be direct personal information, it might be indirect personal information. As soon as that can then be mapped to somebody, it falls under the law. How do we prepare for GDPR? First of all, it's awareness training. It's the same as in security. You have to make sure your staff actually understands the requirements of GDPR and the regulations. You should know which information you hold. You should communicate privacy information. You should ensure that individual rights are maintained. you have to deal, and that's going to be a big technical challenge for many, many companies, is the subject access request. So any user who has data in any of your systems can basically send you a request saying, please send me all your data you have collected about me. Um, doesn't sound so bad, but now imagine you're a company with 200 million customers and suddenly 1,000 customers, 2,000 customers, 3,000 customers send you requests to receive all their information. Most companies, and that's another point that we're going to talk about, outsource information. So if we would do a show of hands here, and we're not going to do it, of how many people in this room know where all their customer data is actually, I don't think I would see a lot of hands, but this is not supposed to. We have the same problems, I know the problems. One of the bigger challenges is going to be to find out where you have customer data. You need consent from the persons whose data you're collecting. You need consent from the parents if you don't violate any laws. You have to report data breaches, and you have to implement data protection by design. You're a lucky person or a lucky company if you've had some standards that were implemented already. If you're ISO 27001 compliant, if you're PCI compliant, at least on a technical basis, you already know what you have to do. It's just touching a lot of money, putting a lot of resources into it to get moving. What's the risk of non-compliance? We're talking about 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover. Until now, you got a slap on the wrist, and somebody said, well, actually in Ireland it was tougher. Some companies did get shut down, but you are not really risking your company. GDPR can affect the future of your company. If you as a big company have to pay 4% of your GDPR as a penalty, you're in big trouble. And the 4% is only the fine you have to pay. If the data of somebody was used for something else, he can also sue you, take you to court. If you have data stolen from multiple customers, you're suddenly facing class action lawsuits against your company. For lower fines, it's 10 million or 2 million global turnover, 2% global turnover. As I said, data processors have the right to claim the full compensation from data controllers. So if you outsource your data, if you use Amazon Cloud, for example, or Dropbox, which I don't think you will be using it for customer data, but if you use any third party to store your data and they lose the data, you can also sue them. So this is really nice for lawyers. Lawyers are going to have a wonderful time because it's going to be very challenging. So implementing GDPR, it can only be done phase by phase or baby steps because it's a huge amount of work that you have to do. And it has to be done carefully. And it relies on an existing platform already in place. So that's what I was talking about. If you have a security platform in place which protects maybe other data, you already have a blueprint that once you take that blueprint and run it across your whole organization, should most probably make you GDPR compliant. So phased approach, if we look at how we would do it, we would have started in January, so we're late already, but we still got till May. It's really assess readiness, which is look at your organization, see how far you are, do a gap analysis, and identify where your wrongs or your faults are, and where you have to put much more work into it. Data inventory audits is probably one of the most important things. Unless you know your whole infrastructure, unless you know the whole data sets you have everywhere, it's going to be really finding the data. So where do we store it? Then we look at data flow mapping, what happens to the data. We store the data on one website, we send it into a SQL server. This SQL server is maintained by somebody else. Then it goes into a cloud application. From there it goes into another cloud application. And then it comes back. You have to document all of that, which is going to be a lot of work. You can start doing building a plan, appointing a data protection officer. Then you do the next gap assessment when you have him. Then you need stakeholder consensus. It shouldn't be so hard to convince your CEO that this has to be done. The legal fines are scary enough. And then awareness training, security breach plan, subject access request, data portability. It's going to be a own project because many companies are not even capable of servicing subject access data requests. If that's the example I had, if your customer suddenly says, send me all your data, it's going to tie down one of your IT guys most probably. Dropping that data, if you have those in large amounts, you have to automate it in some way. Right to be forgotten is even worse for IT. So that's any EU citizen can tell you, I want you to forget everything about me. And that means you have to run through every system in your infrastructure, in all outsourced infrastructures, and have to remove all information about that person. Technically, that's going to be very interesting. So when we're talking about assessing readiness, it's really seeing that you have the engagement of your senior management. You know how you collect your data. Privacy is a topic in your company. You limit the purpose of the data you're storing. You actually have a functioning security infrastructure or a functioning ISMS. You have a data breach response plan. I talked about that yesterday, that response is going to be one of the most critical factors in security over the next years, because nobody is going to be able to secure their infrastructure properly or well enough to be able to avoid breaches. So it's really, if you want to stay in business, it's more about how do I respond to a breach? Who do I contact? How do I get back into business? Data inventory, that's the biggest problem everywhere. We have not yet seen, of course all our customers are awesome, but in general we have never seen a company that had a CMDB or an asset database that was up to date, that was well managed, and that contained all the information it was supposed to contain. And suddenly now you're supposed to protect something when you don't even know what you're protecting. You have to identify with whom personal data have been shared. That's going to be fun. If you have very inventive IT departments who love using cloud appliances and cloud applications, it's going to take you a very long time to even find out where your data is and with whom you've shared it. Existing processes, legal and business grounds for collecting personal data, systems to monitor and protect personal data. That probably most of you have in one way or the other, but you have to actually change your rules to focus on data. Project plan, I don't have to tell you how to build a project plan, and we can share the slides anyway afterwards. Gap assessment, that's really important. You have to see how far you are in order to be able to do a proper plan, to know how much work you still have to do until end of the year or until May. You have to appoint a data protection officer. We've gone through that anyway. You need stakeholder consensus. I'm flying through these so we get to the next set. Transfer data, third-party subcontracting. So now if you don't have a legal team or a lawyer that is very close to you and who's going to love getting all that work from you, you might have to look for one, because basically you will have to review every service level agreement you have with any third party to make sure that they fulfill the requirements you have for GDPR. And they also have to apply to GDPR. Access request, we talked about that before. Training awareness, we talked. Security data breach plan, it's very important. If you lose your data, you have to communicate that. Impact assessment, that also has to be done. We have to assess the impact it has if your data was stolen. So we're in risk management, and that's why now we're starting. I'm showing you one of our products, which is a risk and compliance management product, which is exactly built for this. It was built for risk and compliance, but it has the modules required to do all of this. Consent, yes, right to be forgotten, data retention limitations. Which products can we offer? We offer GDPR consultancy services. We do gap analysis. We do the risk assessment. We do the impact assessment. and we are just announcing a managed platform for small to medium enterprises that's supposed to be based here, that will assist with a very good tool in doing that and helping you getting away from Excel. The tool we're talking about is called Risk Vision, formerly Agiliance. It's a classic GRC tool. Together with Risk Vision, we're starting a managed service that will provide. These are big risk management tools that will provide small to medium enterprise businesses the opportunity to do their asset inventory and their risk assessments, their compliance assessments, and also the filling out of questionnaires and third-party assessments through the tool. Risk Vision has the GDPR catalog inbuilt already. So basically, when you do a GDPR assessment internally, it's just choosing the right controls, identifying your assets on the other side, mapping these assets with the controls, identifying owners, and the system then sends out a report to these people asking them the right controls, collects all the information, and sends the information back to you. It also has other policies in there, so you can also map it to ISO, PCI, or any other regulations. So if you're doing this work, you're actually not going to double the effort, because any questions you had or answered before in any of the other compliance checks you have done will be used for this assessment. So the EU GDPR controls are provided in ISO 27002, and we also have provided premise and cloud content packs that can give you the necessary questionnaires to do your assessments. The Risk Manager is the module that you will be using for your business impact analysis, and the vulnerability management parts can actually help you do the vulnerability management in your infrastructure. So the good thing is this is an enterprise solution. By us actually creating a managed service, and it reduces costs for customers, and it brings it into it makes customers who normally would not spend hundreds of thousands of euros or pounds on a risk management solution to also use this solution. It also connects with your SIM and all your other data sources. So you basically build one central console that will do all your reporting. And you can, when you report incidents or breaches, always immediately provide the right information. It also has a self-service BI tool that can generate the reports you need. That's basically it. I'm ahead of time probably. But if you have any questions, if you would like to see Risk Vision, you can come to the Cognosec stand. Somebody's going to be happy to find some time and do presentations for you, or do a POC for you. Any questions or no questions? Then thank you.